Hey, what's going on, Axe Academy? Alan here, and we are in our series, Politics of the Mind. This idea of the battle in our head sometimes, of the two sides in our head that are going at it, and they're each trying to outdo each other, trying to outwin each other. And one of the things that we've been looking at a few of them. One of them we're going to look at today is courage versus cowardice. And I know one thing that puts us all on a level playing field, whether you're Eric or whether you're just starting out in ministry or wherever you're at in life and your successes in life, one thing that puts us all on the same playing field is we all have at moments had to find courage to overcome our fears. And that's something that should put all of us at ease, saying we all can relate to that. We can all understand that there's moments when we feel like we're not going to succeed, that there's moments that we realize someone else should be doing this, not me. Those moments when we say, I don't believe in myself and I can't do this, this isn't me, I'm not gonna be able to win. One of the stories I want to bring up is a story that made me think of this is James Braddock. James Braddock is an injured and arthritic boxer from the days of the Great Depression. And he's been working on the docks in New Jersey. And as he's working on these docks in New Jersey in the times of the Great Depression, there came a moment where he had to find provision for his family. He had to find food for his family. He had to provide in some way, shape, or form. He had to get there. And so what does he do? He ends up going back and doing something that he did before, which is boxing. He puts himself back into the boxing ring to be able to find his way back again and get the money he needs. So he begins to put himself in that place, and he starts winning fight after fight after fight. He begins to not only keep winning, but he begins to be inspiring a struggling nation during the Depression, and he's inspiring those around him. He's encouraging those around him, and he starts winning. And finally, he wins his way to a showdown with the heavyweight boxer, Max Baer, a vicious fighter, and he was known for killing two guys in the ring. And so this is the culmination as he's winning and moving his way up. He gets a moment where he's gonna be in the ring, and he gets to be alone as he's getting ready to go out. And he's been hearing the threats and the ridicules of what this fighter has been doing, and people are getting concerned for his life, particularly his wife and his kids are very concerned. So when the big day arrives, his wife sneaks into the locker room before Braddock goes to the ring. And he finds her husband in the locker room, and she says these words: "You just remember who you are. You are the bulldog of Bergen and the pride of New Jersey. You're everybody's hope, and you are the kids' heroes. You are the champion of my heart, James J. Braddock." That did something in him. That moved him. There came something in that moment when he was losing his courage. He was allowing fear to get in the way. He remembers who he was, and he gets the right voice with the right people around him, the right situation, and he's reminded of who he is and what he's called to do and what he will accomplish. And at that moment, he goes in and he wins the championship. I think a lot of times we got to get in the ring and do a round with fear ourselves. Sometimes we got to get in the ring, and we are going to have to get in the ring, and we're going to have to face our fears and face some of the opposition and the worst enemies that have come our way. And we have to remember who we are. We are victorious. We are courageous. We are more than conquerors. And just like that wife had to remind James, we've got to be reminded. Scripture will remind us. Your community who's connected to God and loving you will remind you. Your spiritual leadership will remind you. Your friends will remind you. We need that reminder. It's because of Christ we have the victory. We don't battle for victory. We battle from victory because of the cross. Fear's going to throw us many punches in life. It's what fear does. It's going to give us some blows. You're gonna get jacked in the face with an uppercut of worry, a jab of doubt, a cross of uncertainty, a hook of panic. All of those moves is what fear does, and it tries to take you out. And when you get in that ring, you have to face your fears. But when you get hit, you get back up. When fear tries to come at you, you are not gonna be beat down by fear. You will overcome because you're an overcomer, because you're more than a conqueror. It's like this. This is how I see it. Fear is like faith for the kingdom of darkness. If faith in the kingdom of God is belief in God and trust in God, then fear in the kingdom of darkness will continue to will have its way. And the more you give in to fear, the darker things seem to come. I'll read it this way. if fear is faith for the kingdom of darkness, I'm going to contrast the two. Listen, this is how I put it. Faith is hopeful, but fear is hopeless. If you're contrasting the two kingdoms. Without faith, you can't please God. Without fear, you can't please darkness. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Fear comes by hearing, and hearing by the words of darkness and the enemy. Faith is nothing is impossible with God. Fear is nothing is possible with God. Walk by faith and not by sight, or walk by fear because of your sight. Faith says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And fear says, I can do no things through him who gives me strength. There's just such an opposite. When you look at faith and fear, you see that each of them have drastic consequences when you juxtapose them each one to the other. I think one of the greatest pictures when you look at fear and faith in the Bible is this paradox of where you see a storm raging. You see a boat up on the ocean on the Sea of Galilee. You see the disciples wondering and worrying if this boat is going to sink and if they're going to survive. And then you see, you find Jesus sleeping in the bow of the boat. That Jesus is asleep in the hull when the waves are rising and the boat is sinking and the disciples are thinking, we're going to lose the boat. We find out and we almost forget that Jesus controls the storms. Here's the point. It's not the presence of storms that sets you apart. It's the presence of Christ in the storms that sets you apart. We're always going to have storms. I mean, even God says, He says, when the storms come, build your life on sand. When the storms come, you're building on the right things. Storms are part of the Christian walk in life, but Christ, in the midst of the storm, is what's going to be different for you. When I was little, I remember I was out playing out in the yard and I was having a blast, and I grew up on 40 acres of land. I'm out in the middle of the fields. My father built a house and we rented out the land to a game reserve. It's just, I lived in the country. And I remember for me, it was playing outside was the thing. It's what we always did. And I remember one time I was out playing in the yard and we had a bunch of forest around me, and I went to this forest, and I remember as I was going and playing in the forest, I remember I went and while I was exploring and doing stuff, I remember I uncovered this nest of bees. And all of a sudden this swarm began to come around. And I remember, as a kid, when you look at bees, you're just like, oh my goodness, this is freaking me out. And I remember I took off and I sprinted like crazy, and I ran to the house. I remember swatting bees, getting stung, but nothing major. I just remember I ran into the house, slammed the door, and I remember thinking, oh man, this is my refuge. This is it. I, a little bit stung up, but I survived the swarm, I think fear is like a swarm of bees sometimes. Fear is like a swarm of bees, and it's not gonna kill you, but it's going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to sting a little bit. It's going to swarm around you. It's going to, fear is going to stir your anger. It's going to stoke your doubt. You're going to swat away. It's going to make you irritable, but you're going to run and you're going to find the safety of God. You're going to run to that place of where you can go in and find the faith and the confidence and the courage that's found from God. That's why I love what God says in Proverbs 18:10. It says, the name of the Lord is a strong fortress. The godly run into him and they're safe. That's a courageous place to be when you're in the strength of God, in the sanctuary of God, in the fortress of God. Another one, Psalm 61:3, you are my safe refuge, a fortress where my enemies can't reach me. There's nothing like the courage found when you are in the safety of God. Doubts can't come near you. Fear can't suffocate you. There's no sting of worry and doubt or any like that stuff when you are locked in the refuge of God and in the strength of God. Courage is anchoring yourself in the safety of God, plain and simple. A fear-filled life is so limiting. A fear-filled life, you can't dream enthusiastically. You can't love wildly. It's a fearful life. You can't give graciously. Fear will do those things. Where you can't worship in fear. It's like fear neuters the dreams and the visions and the plans and the love and everything that you're called to do for God. It's no wonder Jesus said in John 14:27, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled and afraid. The peace of God is what encourages you and inspires you and compels you to keep going and to keep moving. Because at the end of the day, it's about who's in control. Because when you look and say, well, when I trust God, when I get God my refuge, when I trust the peace of God, it's going to come down to the point of who do you really believe is in control? Because if you really believe God is in control, fear has a lot less of a chance to come in and own the moment. When you're in control, fear has an opportunity to come in. When you put other people in control, or when you put your emotions in control, or whatever, when you put yourself in a place where you're vulnerable to say, I'm going to get out of the control and the sanctuary and the security of God, and I put my safety and security and control in other people and other things and other places. That's where fear has an opportunity to come in and to come in and do its damage and do its work. But when you put your trust in God, when you put your control and say, you're in this, God, you are over this, you are my source, you are the author, you are the protector, you are the finisher of everything that I am and what I am doing. You who began a good work, you are faithful to complete it. You are the starter and the finisher of it. You're the one that gave me the dream, you gave me the vision, you gave me it. Now I'm going to be faithful and steward this well, and I'm going to follow you all the way through it, and you'll take it as far as it needs to go. That when you begin living that way and trusting that way, there's nothing that fear will have. Fear will try its best to come at you, but it's not going to control you ever because you're choosing to trust God. So here's a couple thoughts I have in regards to this politics of the mind of looking at courage and cowardice. Cowardice resists change, but courage gives you a new assignment. Courage gives you a new assignment. Courage comes in and makes you into another person. I mean, we can see that in the Bible. I was thinking Gideon went from a farmer to a general because of what the courage of God has done. Mary went from a peasant girl to obviously the mother of Christ. Paul went from a local teaching rabbi to an evangelist that changed the world and one of the greatest missionaries. God transitioned Joseph from a baby brother into this Egyptian prince. He changed David from a shepherd to a king. Peter went from being a fisherman in the Sea of Galilee to being the rock of the church. This is what courage does. It gives you not only a new assignment, but it gives you a new person, new identity. The more that you can lean into courage and grab a hold of the courage of God that God has in the reservoir and heaven store for you, grab it, get it, let it change you. Another thing is trust the right source. Trust the right source. Courage comes from the Latin word cur, which means heart. And I think there's something in when you get to the source of courage, it always comes down to the heart. When you align your heart to God's heart, when you align your heart, when you open up your heart to others, when you give your heart to God, all the courages will always start there. When you allow the heart of God to beat with yours, when God says, delight yourself in the Lord and I'll give you the desires of your heart, that's God saying, listen, when you get a hold of my heart and when you align yourself to my heart and have my heart, you are going to love, you are going to delight, you are going to love your life, you're going to have the confidence to do it, you're going to see the things you've never seen before and done before because you've got my heart, you've got my courage, you've got what I have to give you. Here's the last thing I'll say, is discover God's perspective. One thing I do know is this, is when you start trusting in what you see, when you start functioning and operating of how you want to do things, when you start positioning yourself more in what you can do with your grit and with your determination, and you start making you the source, then that can move and kind of drift you in a place of insecurity. And here's one thing I know is when you become an insecure leader, insecurity rearranges everything you see as a leader. It will come in and it will allow you to be able to suddenly, you'll start focusing on the wrong things. You start taking to heart what people are saying about you. You'll suddenly start believing the things that the whispers in your head that you're hearing from. That's what insecurity does. And so insecurity will put you in a position where you go and say, no, courage puts the trust back in the right place. It puts the courage back in the right place. It puts the security back in the right place. That's what happens when you surrender yourself and give yourself to God like that. So there you have it, Acts Academy. Politics of the mind, cowardice versus courage. We'll keep swinging away, and we'll see you soon.